Hi, Shay. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Oh, thanks, Mike, for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Okay, so Truth in Advertising. Shay, I'm in a podcast group of yours, and you are my coach. So we talk about, this show is Teach, Coach, Mentor, and you're one of my coaches, and that's why I wanted to bring you on in the podcasting world. But for people that don't know who you are, please tell me what you do, how you got into podcasting specifically, and what your show's about.
Oh my, that's such a you don't have enough time for me to go into everything, so I'll sum it up pretty quickly. I am a certified fearless living coach. I am a master practitioner in NLP, hypnosis, MER, and Reiki. I have been podcasting since 2018 and gosh, how did I get into podcasting? And Well, the quick version is my dad had shared with me 6 months before he passed away, although we didn't know that at the time,
Mm.
that he was drafted to Korea during the Vietnam War. Up until then, and mind you, I'm in my 40s ish at that point, and I didn't know the whole story. He never talked about it because that generation never did, right? I thought because he said he was in Korea, I knew he spent a year in Korea. I thought he'd enlisted, and I thought it was the Korean War. I had no idea it was the Vietnam War.
Oh, okay.
So I had been kicking around the idea of starting a podcast before this conversation with my dad. I think I don't even remember exactly how I was introduced to it. I think I knew what it was a long time ago. And then I actually dated a guy who had a podcast and for a little bit. And he had a podcast that I was like, yeah, if I do one, I want it to look nothing like this.
Okay.
Him and his buddies just sat around and discussed sci-fi movies. And I was like, yeah, I
Hmm.
want something better, more.
I'm not gonna lie, that sounds amazing to me.
Well, and for most people, it probably does, but that is not what I
Oh,
wanted to offer the world. I wanted to do something more.
for sure.
I felt like I had a lot of knowledge and wisdom to share, and I wanted to teach the world to sing, so to speak, to throw back to a Coke commercial that shows my age. And I just wanted to share that. So I started podcasting from the standpoint of I know there's, I know I have something to share. Now, I have something to share, but my guests were really the star of the show, and they're the ones that really had something to share. And when I started podcasting, I called it the power of investing in people, which that's really what it's about. Is what is that? What does that mean? That's what I start off with every interview with. What does investing in people mean to you? And I focused on my friends who were entrepreneurs, and I knew them personally, so I knew this like backstory of trauma that they had went through, or the muck and the yuck, and but they didn't really share it with the world. But in my opinion, it was almost as if the thing they overcame was such a pivotal moment in their business, and that overcome that grit, that gut, that glory that they had to dig into is what propelled them to the success of the next
Yeah.
step of their business. So I wanted to highlight that. And so I really started talking about like what traumatic event have you experienced, and how did that shape or change or shift the direction of the trajectory of where you were heading with your business or even your life. And when they started to talk about it, this really amazing thing started to happen. And it was as if they had been aha'd themselves, right? They didn't even realize the that because of the trauma is how I worded it. They were able to turn it into a treasure,
Hmm.
and that treasure was somehow affecting their business. And I knew that as secret sauce. Like I knew this in every single person's story, and so I really wanted to get down to the nitty gritty of that. And it starts off with what most people don't even realize. Most people think it's something that you do, And the thing that you do is actually about for yourself. It's how did you invest in yourself? And that investment naturally overflows onto your family life and business. And that was the component like, okay, well, you had to invest in yourself because this trauma happened, this thing happened, this, disruption happened. So what did you do? And that is really what I wanted to highlight. And then as time went on, I interviewed, I did not ever ask for guests, and I just got connected with people through social media or people I already knew and or networking events. And someone introduced me to a gentleman who was a veteran and first responder and had started a nonprofit to help veterans and first responders with addiction. And I had him on the show, and he had a big following. And so next thing you know, I had doors open to me to all these veteran and prior military that I never would have expected. And things fell into place. Oh, doors continued to open. And that's how it became more military and business leaders and not just business leaders. So let's talk about the military leaders in that. And that's a whole other conversation we could get into too if you want. So,
Yeah. Okay. So when you bring folks on the show now? Well, maybe just tell me how things have evolved, right? Certainly the podcast can't be the same 7 years ago as it is now, and especially
it's,
as you made this transition of bringing on more military folks in addition to business folks.
yeah, I think it was 2 years ago now, if I remember correctly. It might have been three now. I attended another podcast conference, which I try to do at least one or two a year, the major ones in the United States. And one that I went to was out in Denver. And when I got back, it was just soaking in the information that I got there. And I'm a very spiritual person, and so I'm literally at the beach journaling about it. And I'm like, okay, God, what do you want this to look like now? You gave me this idea, you installed it in me, you've given me all the guests, you've provided me the format of everything so far. What now? And I literally heard, don't you think it's about time you claim your name for the show?
Mm.
And so it shifted from the power of investing in people to the Shay Sparks show. And then because Sparks is part of my obviously my normal my government given name
Right.
and birth name, it is
Well, it's
it
also a
so
verb in
I
that sentence too, right?
right, so I play
Yeah, yeah,
into
yeah.
that, like what how did you ignite your business, or things like that. And so that's really what has shifted for me is the name. The format, the conversation is all very similar. It's all very in that same vein, but just the name really changed.
Yeah. So the obviously the theme for my podcast is teach, coach, mentor. That's something I stole from the military. So it's interesting. I worked with a gentleman uh, kind of early on who does works in the podcasting world, and he asked me about the name. He said, "I don't know if I don't know if I like that name." And he's just doing his marketing thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because you want a name that sticks, a name that lands, a name that makes sense. And to him, it sounded disjointed, but anyone who's been in the military has heard the phrase teach, coach, mentor. It's
yep.
the set of things that and actions that we expect senior enlisted folks and officers to do with the people that are underneath them. And I'm very curious as to why you have a calling to teaching and coaching, right, and mentoring. So we've talked a lot on this show recently about how to do it, and especially in reference to the person being mentored, we've really focused on how to get through failure. So the trauma that you mentioned, how to reframe failure as learning. But I want to hear not just from the other side, from a coach and a mentor, but also I want to hear your why. Like, why do you have a calling for it, and how does it give back to you? I think some folks think that if you're a teacher or a mentor, that you're always giving and you're not getting anything in return. And my experience has been 180 degrees from that. I'd love to hear yours.
Great question. So my journey, I guess, on this began around 21. Most 21-year-olds know everything. But I
I did for
decided,
sure.
right? I, I
Yeah.
I think somehow I decided like I needed to know more. So I went to my first self-development seminar, and it was called the Landmark Forum, if you're familiar with that. And it was monumental. For one, it was had all of these seminars and stuff with it afterwards,
Yeah.
but it was very like you dive in and you ask yourself these questions and you figure it out, kind of a thing. You kind of peel away the layers, is how I describe it. But one of the things that really struck me is I was working. By trade, I'm a cosmetologist, I hairstylist, and at the time I had um, was working in a commission salon where I was only making commission and I had zero clientele. I had one
Mm.
client a month, and I had to figure out how to, survive, how to make it work, how to live. And
Yeah.
I at before I did this, before I started working there, I had started with the self development stuff. So I had the money to pay for that. So here I am attending the self development, working on myself, but professionally I'm dying.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking around the lessons that I was learning, and I believe it was the integrity seminar that showed up. And integrity, the way they described it, is who you are when no one's looking.
Sure.
And I thought, okay, so who am I that, and who am I, number one? And then what did I say that I wanted to be when I grew up, when I was a kid? You know how
Hmm.
you're asked that when you're a kid, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's a, firefighter, nurse, military, whatever. And I was like, well, what did I want to be? And the first thing that came to mind is what I wrote down, and it was teacher. And I was like, well, that's dumb. I didn't like school.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
sure don't want to be a teacher because all I could think about is boring teachers that I had. And I don't
Yeah.
like English, math, science. Like, I don't really like any of that. I mean, it's okay, but it's nothing I want to teach on a day, passionate about day in and day out. And
Yeah.
I'm talking to my one client of the month, and I'm sharing that with her. And I'm like, so what do you think? You kind of know me for a while. So if I was to teach something, what would I even teach? And she's like, well, duh, you're going to teach this cosmetology. And I was like, right,
That's your
of course.
profession.
Like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
made sense. Like, why wouldn't I? So I
Yeah.
had been out of school for maybe a year and a half at this point. So I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to go back to cosmetology school, instructor school. So I did. Within 3 weeks, my mom thought I was absolutely crazy. But
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what, mom? If it's meant to be, it'll work out. It'll all fall into place. And it did. Like, no joke.
Mm.
I found the cheapest studio apartment in the world. And it was literally 2 blocks from the school.
Yeah.
And I found an hourly paying salon job that was probably 6 blocks from the school.
Oh, nice. That's
And
great. Yeah.
so I was able to survive. And not just survive, I thrived. I mean, I made it all happen, went back to school 40 hours a week, worked 40 hours a week in the salon, and just made
Yeah.
it work. And it was like, wow, this was not totally unexpected, not even on my radar. But I was like, well, I'm only losing, and not even really losing, but I had one client that I was like, oh, I'm leaving
Yeah.
and moving on. And so when I got into the teaching part, the teaching is sharing your gifts, but the for me the best part was watching the student aha,
Yeah.
like it finally clicked with them.
Right.
And so when I got out of the instructor school part, I actually went into a salon and became their educational director and was with them for 10 years as an educational director and a stylist. And I trained their entire um, location, the Kansas City location. There was 3 locations. I trained all their staff for 10
Yeah.
years and loved, loved, loved it. And for me, again, it wasn't about um, me being able to like, I'm telling you what to do. It was me going, look how you made that client feel. And they're
Yeah.
like, well, thank you so much. I go, I just guided you. You're the one who did it.
Hmm.
And so as my life and my career took off and kept going and opened my own salon and things, I would have people who knew me from that salon, that corporate salon. They would call me up and be like, "Hey, I need to have you come into my salon now and teach a class." I'm like, "Absolutely." So I would
Yeah.
just get people saying, they need me, so to speak, because I had I guess a gift, but for me, it's like education, entertainment, all rolled into one, right?
Yeah.
And having fun with it. And so I was and I'm hard. I'm not an easy person to get by. I'm like, nope, this is how you stand, this is how you hold your scissors, like this is what you do. And I was like, okay. So as time went on, um, I was like, what else could I do with this? Because at some point, I'm not going to be able to stand behind the chair all day, every day. My shoulder was starting to hurt. So I'm
Yeah.
like, I got to figure out what's next for me. And so it was just kind of a natural progression that at some point I would be coaching and helping others in a one on one. And then I knew that it needed to be bigger than one on one, which led me to starting the group that you are a part of.
Yeah. And what's your experience been there? So there's something obviously very personal about one-on-one coaching, and yet just speaking from experience, like the group feels like one-on-one coaching. It doesn't
Mm,
feel like you're talking to everybody. It feels like you're talking to me, right?
mm,
So how do you do that? How do you scale? Right, this is
mm.
everybody's. So we're talking. You talked about entrepreneurs earlier. This is every entrepreneur's problem right now who is in the community space, which is me. Which is that you say, I love working with people and I love guiding them and I love helping them and I love seeing them have wins. But then on the other side, you're looking at the reality of the world, and it's I can't just sit down with one person at one time and live a good life. Or I'd have to charge outrageously exorbitant prices, and then
Right.
only a few people can afford it. And maybe those aren't people you want to work with. So, I think what a lot of folks are trying to figure out in the coaching space, in the community space, is how do I scale but not lose authenticity and not lose the personal connection with the people? So, how do you do that?
Well, I have several clones hanging in my closet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I wish I had a secret to any of it other than it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So when I was exploring coaching, I was like, I like the one-on-one. In the salon world, I went from having a salon or working in a salon to having a suite. So I'm literally door closed on to one-on-one. And I don't know how to describe it other than it's like a feeling that bubbles up from your toes and it works your way out of your body, that I am made for more than one on one. And so I started to research what that looks like. And so there's one to many, which
Right.
is like in a group aspect. There's many to many. So you
Mm.
retrain or you train other people to do what you do. You train the trainers, which
Yeah.
is what we have come up with in order in our group to recreate it. So you scale it by one person at a time.
Yeah.
Most people, and I want to skip this step. In fact, I was just on a coaching call earlier for me to be coached on how can I scale this, da 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 da, and I knew the answer, but I was trying to skip steps. And they're like one person, and they didn't say one person at a time, but they were saying keep doing
Yeah.
what you're doing, and I was like, got it, one person at a time, okay. But
Right.
that's literally how you do it. You got to keep going, keep making it to where you add the next person, you add the next person, you add the next person, and you take it from one to one to many. And
Yeah.
then you start training others
To do the same.
not to be you, in my
Right. No, of
opinion.
course. Yeah.
I actually believe that I train people to be better than me. So then they can go out and train people to be better than them.
Right.
And the reason is that no one needs me, another me. They only need one, right?
Mm.
So for me, especially in the world of artificial intelligence, as it's going to explode, we have to remain that human interaction. In fact, I just wrote an article about it on LinkedIn, and I'm calling it HI. We have to continue to keep that HI
Ooh, I like that.
relevant.
I'm gonna steal that. I'll
Yeah,
reference
please
you.
do.
Don't
Yeah,
worry.
please do.
Yeah.
We
Where's
have to,
the HI? Yeah.
yeah, where is the HI? So if you think of your business as being online, where's the HI?
Yeah. So it's that's a really great question, and I know a lot of people are concerned about AI displacing human interactions, and I'm less concerned about it. Is it going to be a problem? Yeah. Like there's going to be some 14-year-old dudes that are going to have an AI girlfriend, online, right? I mean, that's just going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to, when you're struggling to find human interaction and you can't find it, especially when you're young, you're going to default to, you know, other things that might be available, even if that's artificial. But I suspect that for most people, that we can and will find ways to use AI to better our interactions. So trying to come up with an example off the top of my head might be as something as simple as how often do we spend time with each other in business meetings where we're going through mundane conversation that could be offloaded potentially by
Mm.
AI, where then we can spend meaningful time talking about either strategy or just each other, right? I think that's if people are smart, they can use that in that way. Um, or in terms of coaching, right? So I think there's a lot of people that are hooked on tools like Delphi and some of these others that can make you, and then you can interact with some AI version of somebody, and that might be useful in some niche cases. The thing that maybe I could think would be as if someone has a question that they want to answer at midnight, right? I suppose they can ask the AI version of Shay what they should do, but things like that I don't think are going to take off because nobody likes talking to the not the real thing. I would rather talk to you in a group setting than an AI version of you in a one-on-one if I could avoid it, right? That's so I don't know. I see more the former, less the latter, where people are going to use AI in ways that increase the HI. So I don't know. Do you see that, or do you see more problems than solutions coming?
Well, I could see both. I could see
Yeah.
both sides. Believe that well, first of all, you used a keyword that I love, and I think most people are forgetting that is the word meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that, one of the benefits I believe and you can speak on this, of being in our particular group is that we do work that's meaningful. And we're not just doing it, we're making it, right?
Yeah.
It's like we're taking out the clay and we're creating it with our own hands. We're playing with Play-Doh. We're making it. We're making meaningful work. And for me, that is where the definition, what how I say, the determination of, I can't even think of the word, differentiation. There we go.
There we
Will
go.
be is that what does meaningful mean to actual humans,
Mm-hmm.
and what does it mean to have a conversation with AI?
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example, and I go back to this because it's what I know. When you leave getting a haircut, most people feel pretty darn good about it. If it's a good haircut, they feel pretty darn good about themselves.
Right.
And I believe that human interaction that is meaningful is what the world is starved for already,
Yeah.
because ever since what, 2007, 2009 is when smartphones came in and everybody's been looking down.
Yeah.
So we've already seen where kids are disconnected. I mean, you can go to any restaurant. In fact, just just put a test out there for you or for your audience. Go out into the public, go to a restaurant, go to a coffee shop, go wherever there are people gathering at tables, And notice how many are actually, having a conversation, looking in each other's eye,
Right.
and how many people are looking at their phone.
It's so funny. The podcast that I started, I started it for, to be perfectly frank, for business reasons. I was, hey, I'm going to start this community, but people don't know me. So if I ever want to scale this thing, I have to get out there. And then, so it was kind of for like business and networking. And then day one, I realized I'm not going to ever do a podcast for the business or for networking. Like that may happen and that would be great, but I want to do it for the value and the meaning of the conversation. So the first guest that I had was a friend of mine. It's just another, a military guy. He's another military guy. He's a good friend of mine, really great dude. And I asked him if he would do it, and he was excited. And then we had like this hour-long conversation, no phone in sight, right?
Yeah.
And at the end, we kind of stopped recording, and then we were just chit-chatting. And I don't know if it was him or me. I think it was him. And he made the comment. He's like, dude, why have we never done this? We've known each other for several years. We
Wow.
have never just sat down and had an hour-long conversation about leadership and mentorship and coaching. And like, we've never done that. And he's like, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if I've ever actually sat down with another officer or another, senior enlisted guy and just had that conversation out, right?
Wow.
And it's because it's superficial. You get distracted by the phone, or you're eating food, or you're in an activity, and there isn't the formal dedication of, no, we're going to spend 30 to 40 to 50 minutes looking at each other in the eyes. Granted, it's through a screen, but with zero distractions, just have a meaningful conversation, listen to each other, and see where it goes. And so for me, like, I want to replicate the podcast every time I'm out with a human being somewhere. I don't want them to feel like they're being interviewed, but I do. I
Yeah.
mean, that's really what it is, though, right?
Yeah.
Is getting down to the truth and figuring out what's going on and talking about difficult things. But we're so distracted and moving so quickly that I'm hoping that AI, maybe this is just the optimist in me, will then displace a lot of the things that make us so busy and make us move so fast. And I know we talked about this in the group the other day, was that another thing I'm kind of hopeful for is that it ruins the internet and social media for people, right? I know it's
Yeah.
a crazy thing to
Yeah.
say, but if
Yeah.
everything can be disinformation, then none of it is trustworthy.
Right.
And so I'm hoping, and I talked to a teen therapist on the show, Brittany Fella, a few episodes ago, who talked about, in her experience, young people are spending less and less time on their phones and less time on social media. And I hope that trend continues, or people put it away and live in the real world. And if AI can actually contribute to that in some way, because you don't know what's real or what's fake, and people are just over it, then they might actually set it down and spend some time with each other.
Yeah. I think about, when we were kids, there was the openness to like go outside and play,
Yeah.
right? And you played with your neighbors and or whatever, kids in the neighborhood. And as time has gone on, the culture, society, whatever you want to call it, shifted to my kids need to be busy. So they were in every sport,
Mm,
they
yeah.
didn't
Huge
they
activity explosion.
right. So then it
Yeah.
was activity. They're constantly doing, right? They're doing. So the any time that they were being, which is being still, it was foreign to them. So
Mm,
they were like, no, I need to do things. So that's why we saw that shift, right? Because I think kids inherently figured out that they're tired, right? Because as parents, we're like, no, you need to be in all the things. So I don't have to really parent you and be busy because I'm busy and I got things to do too, right?
mm.
So it was all, it's a trend, right? That is definitely shifting. I would love to see the internet eventually like not be there. And I said that from the beginning, like it is the best thing and the worst thing that's going to happen to us as a society. It will be interesting if things like Britannica dictionary or encyclopedias show back up again as, oh my god, now they're worth like $100,000 because no one
That's
has them
funny.
and they were true to
Yeah.
an extent, right? Who knows? I just know that this in what we're speaking about, putting them on the phone, not being distracted, having a meal, even at home with your family, with no phones, no distractions, is called presence.
Yeah. Yeah, for
And
sure.
we've gotten away so much of that that it doesn't happen on a regular basis anymore.
Yeah.
And for me, that's what I gave every single one of my hair clients. I couldn't look at my phone while I'm cutting hair. My hands are busy,
Right. Yeah.
right? I gave them my full attention. That's what we do in our group is to give them the people the full attention. That's what you do. We do as podcasters on an interview. We give them the full attention. And that is where that human connection comes in. That's why your friend was like, oh my God, this feels amazing
Right.
because he got your presence, which is really the gift.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to think about that one for a while. I mean, it's something I think I have thought about for a long time already. And in my community, we were mostly working with teens and young college students. And you feel like such an old person when you're like, get off your phone. Don't be on your phone so much. And also, I'm a huge hypocrite when I say it because I'm on it too much, right?
Yeah.
My wife and I have made it a concerted effort to be sure around our daughter, our oldest daughter, who's 8 now. Uh, we have to be really careful not to be sitting around on her phone because she sees it and then she wants to do the same thing.
Right.
And I know that's not good for her, right?
Right.
So we've tried to implement better rules, especially around dinner time and those sorts of things. But the thing that I think is and I don't want to be the old man here, but there is a generational difference between those that grew up with phones their whole lives and those that didn't.
Right.
And that's that when I realize I'm doing it too much, I do have the ability to put it away. And even though it kind of calls to me still a little bit, I don't have that big of a problem leaving it away. And for a lot of young folks that I work with, it's really painful. It's much
Mm.
more painful. Like for me, it's just annoying because I have a habit. I have a habit of wanting to pull my phone out. I have a habit of doing things, but it's just a habit. It's not painful. I remember what it's like to be bored without a phone, and I don't mind. I don't mind, putting myself in the position sometimes. But just as an example, at the last school that I taught at, there's an ethics class that everyone is required to take, and in that class, they do an experiment where they do a 3 day no, maybe it's a full week of they're not allowed to have their phone. And I love it. Right? So they cannot have it at all. They tell their whole family, hey, I won't be available. They put a thing out on social media. Don't freak out. I won't be around for 5 days. And for 4 or 5 days, I think they have to do a phone cleanse. And these kids are itching in
Yeah.
class or, right? They're like, what do I do? I am so bored. And, I think the emotional state that they're experiencing is something different than maybe what you and I would experience, where we go to reach for it and then you go, okay, I don't have my phone. It's not a big deal. And I know what this is like. But many of them struggle with it. It's because we handed them this thing at 9 or 10 years old, which is,
Or younger.
or younger. And
Yeah.
they almost don't remember a time, not being in front of a screen constantly. So, I think we need to fix that. Jonathan Haidt does a lot of work on this, especially with kids on phones and on social media. And I'm fully on board with we need to kind of detox ourselves of that and have more interaction, more human and meaningful experiences, and honestly just be bored. Because I do some of my best thinking when I'm bored, right? Just going through a new idea, thinking back at things that have happened in the past, suddenly you're struck with, oh, maybe I should try this, maybe I should try that. And I think a lot of interesting things happen when you're not completely lost in thought, because when you're lost in thought, you're kind of doing that unconscious thinking. You tend to not remember what you were doing, but it's kind of this controlled, meandering sort of thinking that you can often do when you're bored. I think that's really good, really healthy.
I agree. And that's kind of how we determine how to solve problems, right? Is having that space and that time in our brain to actually mull it over, if you will, right? Think about it,
Yeah.
like analyze it from all angles. And if you're distracting yourself, and as especially that generation does, then they're not learning how to analyze. They're not learning how to think, and I hate to say this, critically, but differently, right? They're not learning how to think differently. What they're learning is I Google, it gives me the answer, there it is.
Mm.
Um, and I hope that the man that you mentioned, really looks into other aspects other than it just being a habit. I feel like it's definitely an addiction. And I'm so guilty of it myself, even especially in social media at times. But it also goes deeper than that, where there's a blue light that comes out instead of the red light that is more healthier. TVs have blue light, screens have blue light, computers, that all has this, puts out, that emanates this blue light. And in that blue light, the frequency that's coming from that is actually affects our brain to want to pick it up. It
Mm.
is creating impulses like, oh no, it's calling to me. Um, have you ever had your phone on silent but swear you heard it?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's,
And
I
then you're
haven't
like,
heard,
oh wait, I did get a notification about something.
yeah, I haven't heard about the blue light. I'll have to take a look at that. I do know there's this phenomenon where you feel the buzzing on your leg or something, right? And then you go and there's no notification, right? So you're just imagining the vibration. I've certainly read that that's happened. So, I mean,
And
the
why?
folks that,
How has that happened? You know what I mean? Like, what is going
yeah,
on that has actually happened? I had a Bluetooth watch in the early days, because I have an Android. I don't say Apple Watch, but I had a Bluetooth watch, and I it was all off. Like the notifications was off and everything, and it buzzed constantly. And I was like,
mm,
"What is the deal?" I got to the point where I noticed a freckle right above it on my arm had turned darker, and I was
hmm,
like, "I think this is from Bluetooth. No one can tell me differently. I think I
yeah,
have a not an
that's funny.
allergy. I'll say I'm sensitive to Bluetooth.
Mm,
Again, research it. It's been known. I mean, that's why they're saying to not have, to go back to the cords, to go back to uh, putting it on speakerphone rather than holding it up to your head,
mm.
is because of that. So there is something in there that, maybe in our lifetime, maybe in our lifetime, that they will find out. It was probably like, oh my God, that was so damaging. Why did we do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, regardless of the signals coming from the phone, the people that designed them and designed the apps, that they designed it to get your attention, right? And I'm not
Right.
ascribing any nefarious intention on the part of the designers, but simply to note and observe that everything that has gone into the phone has been meticulously crafted to get you to be on it more, right?
Right.
That's all the physical hardware, and then of course all of the images and the little red circles that say you have a notification are, hacking your brain to get on it and spend more time with it. And that's so hard to fight. Even just being aware of it doesn't make it easier to ignore and to stay away from. And my wife brought this up the other day. This is especially um, difficult to break away from because so much of your life is on the phone now. But you can do
Right.
all of your banking on the phone. We order groceries on the phone for
Right.
grocery pickup. And so there's many orders of business that have to be attended to that are now just so convenient by the phone. I've tried as hard as I can to use my laptop in place of
Mm.
normal activities. I can still bank on my laptop. We can still order food on the laptop. I can get on social media if I have to on the laptop. And so I'm really doing the best that I can, which is difficult as an entrepreneur and a business person when you need to be gotten a hold of, at all times. But I still try to displace many activities as I can to the computer so that if I'm going to go and I'm going to sit down at the computer, it's because I have an intention of doing something. I want to be there. I'm, there to accomplish a task, and then I can walk away from it. Whereas the phone, I mean, we've all been there where we just wake up almost out of a haze and you realize you've been on your phone. And you're like, oh, wait, what am I doing? I'm checking my email for the fifth time today,
Right.
or in the last 10 minutes. Yeah, exactly. So, well, I want to shift over for our last topic to get into more of your podcast and who you've had on lately and the episodes that or the conversations that have affected you the most. So, the first question I really asked you today was your why and why you coach and why you mentor. And so I love the backstory and how you got into it. But now I'd love to hear more about what you've gotten from it and the guests that you've had on recently and how they've impacted you and what you've learned from their experiences and their successes and their failures.
Mm. Good question. And I have to think about that one. I honestly can't recall anyone that has been in the media recent, but I can, a few people
We
stand
can
out.
go back in time if we need
I was
to.
going to say a
Yeah,
few
yeah,
people
yeah.
stand out for sure. One in particular, I mentioned him. He was a veteran who, um, and first responder. He was a firefighter, and he was actually in the Oklahoma City bombing recovery as a firefighter,
Oh, wow.
and as the National Guard as well. And so he was affected in so many ways with trauma, and that's where his addiction started.
Mm.
And in that conversation that we had as he was sharing his story, that's when I put two and two together that trauma wasn't necessarily a PTSD, wasn't a military um, thing,
Mhm.
diagnosis, right? It could have been anyone who's experienced some sort of trauma. Now, I get that there's different types of trauma, big T, little t, complex, all of that.
Sure.
And I'm not simplifying any of it. What I'm saying is that it just opened a door for me. For me personally, I had been in an abusive relationship prior to this, and it never crossed my mind that I had experienced trauma.
Mm.
So having that conversation with him, I was like, wow, that makes so much sense. That's literally what I mean, I didn't go through what he went through, but got it. Okay, that makes sense of what I'm experiencing as PTSD from what I went through. And that really helped shaped what I did as a coach is, taking what I learned from the conversations in the podcast was how we can take our trauma and it can either define us or we can choose how we can use it as that it happened for me instead of to me
Mm.
so that it becomes treasure rather than a deterrent. And
Yeah.
I will say that as a whole in all of my conversations, that's really edified every single time I have a conversation of this is why I do what I do, because it really highlights how we do have a choice of what we've gone through. We could let it hold us back and stop us, and we could become the victim, or we can take responsibility and ownership of it and be like, all right, how can I use this for the good?
Yeah. Yeah. It's two thoughts on that. Which is one, it's very well known in the psychological community and literature that the best way to get through a traumatic event or through something like PTSD is voluntarily confronting those issues. And again, I'm not arguing that that's easy, but it's a voluntary and typically slow process of one step at a time, confronting it more and more head on. What's interesting to me that I think again people know, but maybe the average person doesn't know, is that people come out stronger on the back end. They don't, right? And so people like to use this word resilience, and I've talked about this on the show before, but I don't like resilience because resilience is a resistance to the ability to resist a force or to maintain through adversity. But humans are anti-fragile, right? We're the opposite of fragile, and that we don't break when difficult things occur to us. We get stronger. Um, it's That's one of my favorite terms that I'm almost always, I don't mention it on every show, but I mention it on quite a few, and I'm sure my listeners are really tired of hearing me say it, but I can't drive it home hard enough because when you're going through something really challenging, especially if it's emotional, especially if it's traumatic, it's so hard to just not be completely consumed by it. And if you can take a step back for half a second and reframe what's happening, and again, I'm not suggesting that's easy, but if you can reframe what's happening and understand that there is a path through this in which you will emerge better on the other side, and it's on you to find that path and to voluntarily confront what you're going through, I think it makes it easier to accomplish. And if people don't know that they can do that, then they're not looking for a path, and they're looking to escape or to hide through whatever it is that's happening, which is the last thing that it may be the only option you have in some instances, but it's really the last thing that you want to do. And the other thing that you made me think of is I like that you talked about someone else going through a different traumatic experience, and you said, well, there's big T, little T, complex, all these different varieties. And, it's not a competition, obviously, right? Nobody's trying to win. But one of the things that bothers me about a lot of discourse today, especially when it surrounds difficult or challenging topics, is this denial of another human being trying to understand what you're going through, right? So you'll hear, well, I hear this sometimes, well, you don't have my lived experience. Well, of course I don't. Obviously, right? We are different.
Right.
We are different people. It doesn't, even if we've had the exact same physical trauma in real life, we still experienced it differently because we're different.
Right.
We're different human beings. Um, but the insistence that I couldn't possibly understand, while it may be technically true, it shouldn't stop me from trying to understand because that's what connects us as human beings. And I get frustrated sometimes because the conversation gets shut down where it's you'll never understand what I went through. Of course not. But in trying, right, we know each other. We can know each other better. That is a unique ability that human beings have, which is we can try to imagine what it might be like in someone else's shoes. I can try to imagine what you went through. Doesn't mean I'll know that pain, but I think it brings people together when we try to understand each other in that way. And all too often, I think people push each other away and say, "Well, you'll never understand, so why even bother?" So I don't know what do you think about that? What's your take there?
Well, I love that you say that. Like, you would never understand why even bother. Because it's not about sympathy. It's about, and I'm not going to use the word empathy. You used the word. It's about understanding from a place of literally understanding the feeling of what you went through rather than the actual experience. Even if you were in the same house and experienced the same, we'll say, childhood beating, right? Your parents, one of your parents abused you. You still would not have the same experience, right? You both would experience it differently. However, you would more than likely come away with the same feeling of what it left you. And that's where people have a tendency to shy away from because they think they want to get stuck in the minutia of the details of the event. And that's what I would learned as a coach is the circumstance happened. Your thoughts about that circumstance is what drives your feelings, and that drives your actions to get the results that you're having right now. And if you want different results, you have to reverse engineer it all the way back to your thoughts on that event and your feelings, and shift your feelings through thoughts so that you can have better results. Now, why am I
Yeah.
saying all that? I'm saying that because it goes back to that meaningful conversation. How many times have you talked to somebody about their events, but you didn't ask, how did that make you feel?
Mm.
I
Yeah.
had a guest. This one, you asked about memorable guests, and this one always comes to mind. In fact, I give when I give when I speak at podcast conferences, I speak about him because a lot of times I'll teach on how to do an interview.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to ask the question that's never been asked before, even though we may not know what that is, but we have to follow our intuition on what that possibly could be. And this man was a veteran. He had experienced PTSD. He got blown up. Basically, was actually in the major hospital there in DC, which Walter Reed, and he had TBI, and so a traumatic brain injury, excruciating pain, was suicidal, and was ready to shoot himself at any given moment for years. And he has now started a battle buddy program where he checks in. He says, check in with your battle buddy, that you just check in and be like, hey, you're good today, right? Like you're not going to pick up anything or take anything to end it. You're still here.
Yeah.
And as he's telling me his journey and he's sharing all that, and he went through all the details of the trauma, and we often do this, and then we minimize the good that came out of that. I said, well, how does it, now that you're transformed what you went through to something so meaningful and beautiful and heartfelt, how does that make you feel? And this man, who constantly wore sunglasses, didn't even look in the camera the whole time, he was looking off to the side. I said, how did that make you feel? He took off his sunglasses, looked straight in the camera, and he said, how did that make me feel? And I said, yeah. And he puts his sunglasses back on. He says, nobody's ever asked me that before. And that showed me how often we as a society get stuck on the story and not the feeling behind it. So when you say that you're looking to understand someone's story, then ask them about the feeling, where they're at now. What did that leave them with? How did they feel at the time? Because that's what you can understand.
Can't forget about the HI, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
very good. Well, Shay, that's a strong story to end it on, but I think that ends it out nicely, and we're kind of at about that hour mark. So the question that I like to ask, because I know that there is a perfect question out there that I should have asked you today that I didn't. But the question that I like to ask that always covers my ground is, what question should I have asked that I didn't? And that usually gets people thinking. And if they can't think of one, it means I win. So, and then also as my podcast coach, how did I do as an interviewer today? I want to know that too. I want my audience to know. Let's get some real live critiques here and learn something. So,
Well,
you're
first of all,
welcome to take either one or both.
yeah. Well, first of all, let me ask you a question. How did you think you did?
Oh, I hate that question. You're not allowed. You're not allowed to ask me that, Shay. You can invite me on your show if you want to know. I love doing the podcast. I'm very cognizant of how much I talk. I'm an extroverted person, and I enjoy talking, and I enjoy storytelling, and I've been teaching for many years. And so I try very hard not to talk too much. And I'm always concerned or worried that I talk too much, and especially on a show where I've invited a guest on and I'm supposed to be asking them and not just saying what my opinion is. So I think I did okay today. I don't think I talked too much. There was an episode that I had recently where I definitely was pitching in too much, and I was aware of it, especially in editing. So
Well, I have an answer to that. So
here
I
we go.
love
Drum
that
roll.
so we all talk too much, right? I mean, you could send the people the questions beforehand and you're like, well, question 3.
That's
There you
true.
go.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
The reason that your audience is here and engaged is because you're sharing you. And they come back because of you.
Mm.
So every time they learn something new about you, they're like, oh, I love what he said about understanding. I want to go back for more because I can't wait to hear what else he has to say. that is giving them a piece, a buy-in, if you will, a clue on the kind of person who you are and why they want to continue to listen.
Yeah.
So, and with your guest, so there's always, in my opinion, there's always three people in the conversation: the host, the
Yep.
guest, and the audience, right?
Yeah.
So, and then your guest is you're building rapport. When you sat down with your friend, did you go, question 3?
Yeah, no.
No,
No,
right?
that's what that's one of the things I love about podcasting is it is a conversation, right? It is, there's the back and forth element there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, from a podcast coach's standpoint, I think you did phenomenal.
I'll
I
take
think you
that.
did
That's a win.
fantastic. The thing, I don't even know if I would say that. I don't necessarily know if there is a question that I um, missed that you didn't ask me, other than the normal of where can people connect with you or things like that. For
Well, it's
me,
because
I'll
I
share
haven't
with,
ended the episode yet, Shay.
got it. Okay. So I love the organic feel of it. Let me say that. Love the organic of it more than anything. And I think that's huge. What I have found is that there are a lot of successful people. They ask the same 5 questions, and that's fine. And there's nothing
Yeah,
wrong with
yeah.
that. But that is not who you are.
No, I
You
don't like
want
that at
that
all.
engagement. I
Yeah,
do
yeah, yeah.
too, right?
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
I do ask. The first question I ask is, what does investing in people mean to you? And then the last 3 questions I ask, I'll say the last 2. The last one I won't give you, but the one is, where can people connect with you? And then I ask, what is your legacy? What do you want to be remembered for? So if
Oh, that's
you
good.
find, and I said say this to any podcaster out there, if you find a question that is very interesting to you, that you actually want to know the answer to,
Yeah,
that would be like a signature question for you to continue to ask.
I like it. Okay. Well, I'll have to think on that. I'll have to cogitate a little bit on that one.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
you could, if you don't mind, can I suggest something?
yeah,
Yeah.
please.
You could ask, how is a teach, coach, mentor different, or how is it the same?
Yeah, that was the one in the back of my mind is the difference between the three because we often use them interchangeably
Mm-hmm.
and they are very distinct activities, I think. So I think that's a great question to start off with. I have actually given some thought to an end question. It's very similar to yours, but I might frame it slightly different, which is that, what does success in your life look like? Specifically from the vantage point of being on your deathbed, right?
Mm.
When in those last few moments and you look back on your entire life and everything that you've done and everything you've accomplished and all the people that you know, what is going to be the final few thoughts of I'm really happy for this, and that's that thing that I did or that person that I helped, whatever that is. What's that version of success look like in your mind? So I probably have to find a more succinct way to put it, but I think that would be the question that I would ask. So here we go.
Yeah.
You're the first one. Where can we find you? Right? How can people get a hold of you? What are you up to? And then also, what does success look like at the end of your life when you're looking back on it?
Well, first of all, I answer it in reverse. So, what it looks like is me being resilient. Sorry, I had to do it.
That's okay. That's all right. It's a good. You can be resilient for sure. Yeah, yeah.
No, I had
Nothing
to
wrong
say
with
it.
being resilient.
I love that question actually. Like it's kind of like, what are you about to be remembered for, right? So
Yeah.
for me, on my deathbed, I want to know that I made a positive impact in other people's lives. That's been my purpose since I was 19. I've known that, and yeah, that's me. You can find me at all social media: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Shay Sparks. That's SHASPARKS. My podcast is The Shay Sparks Show. My website for my podcast is theshaysparkshow.com. And you can leave a message on there and let me know that you heard me on Mike's show. and that he's doing brilliant. So I know that you're going to subscribe and like and share with one person this episode because it made a positive impact
Perfect.
in your life.
Well, you made a positive impact on me today. So thank you so much for joining me, Shay.
Thank you, Mike.